Giuliani, and this is America's Mayor Live. And I am doing a special introduction of it here at John F. Kennedy Airport, in between my return from Rome to John F. Kennedy, and now going to Florida. But during that period of time, of course, a lot of things have happened. You might remember that 2 nights ago we had an interview with President Milorad Dodik of Republika Srpska. Srpska is a very hard to describe what it is because the Dayton Agreement that created it back in the early 90s is very ambiguous. But let's call it an autonomous region within a Muslim-dominated country, Bosnia-Herzegovina. It is a Christian country. In fact, it's a minority, but it's 49%. 49% of that country is Republika Srpska. 51% of the country is Bosnia-Herzegovina, but it controls Srpska, kind of. So, this is what was the result of a Clinton-imposed one-world group of lefties who came up with this asinine arrangement, which could only be done by one-world jackasses. When they draw lines in countries, it means constant friction, if not warfare, and conflict. Very rarely does it ever work out when it's imposed on countries. This, of course, was a disaster that not only was waiting to happen, it has happened. Since the Clinton people created this Bosnia-Herzegovina, it has been a sporadic haven for Muslim terrorists, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and ones we probably don't even know the names of. But most importantly, and of great concern to me, it contributed trained two of the murderers of our citizens on 9/11. Beyond that, there were celebrations throughout this Muslim-dominated country when our citizens were killed on September 11. They, of course, were quite content with the October 7 brutal animalistic assault on the Israeli children and women, and have supported Hamas throughout in its effort to terrorize Israel. And they have voted when they can, and certainly expressed support for some kind of limitation or destruction of the state of Israel. On the other hand, the autonomous region and its president, Milorad Dodik, have been consistent long-term supporters of Israel, having received a accommodation or statement of support from none other than Bibi Netanyahu for his Dodik's support of Israel. They have been gone out of their way to be supporters of President Donald Trump, including, instead of having celebrations of the murder of Americans on September 11th, instead of contributing murderers to come to America and kill us, they had big celebrations when Donald Trump was elected president. That's a big part of the problem. And also, when you consider the verdict, which I've had a chance to read, I'd say not in the depth that I normally would because I didn't have the time, but at least enough so I understand it. This is very much in the tradition of the lawfare verdicts imposed by Biden, by the Democrats, by left-wingers who verge on communism, and people who have no regard for free speech, who trash it constantly, even though they then accuse their opponents of being neo-Nazis and fascists, when in fact they're doing a fascist and neo-Nazi things. For example, this criminal case is about the president's differing interpretation of the governing agreements, where he believes that one might say they give his country or his region more autonomy than the Muslims believe it does. Well, that's okay. That happens almost always in this situation. You could predict it when the morons created this monstrosity of a region. If you look at it on a map, it looks like it was created by a crooked Democratic congressman in New York or in California. It looks like this. That's the country. So, the State Department, within within less than 24 hours of this verdict, approved it. They couldn't possibly have read it closely. And then they expressed support for the Dayton Agreement, which I think if Marco Rubio and Donald Trump got a chance to read it, they would vomit. I mean, this is precisely a great example of what's been wrong with our foreign policy for so many years and what's been wrong with the State Department. This agreement was an agreement that only could be made by people who wanted to perpetuate and or were afraid to face the truth about Islamic extremism, and therefore created an Islamic monstrosity and a contrived Christian minority who are treated, as you might imagine, as not second-class citizens, not third-class citizens, as not having any rights, including not having the right to have their own interpretation of the agreement. Now, if there's a differing interpretation, that goes to a court. You don't put a man in jail for that. Well, they sentenced him to 5 years in jail. I'm sorry, 1 year in jail. However, even more than that, they stripped him of his presidency for 5 years. That was given to him by the people in a legitimate, overwhelming win. It's not the first time he's been president. He probably is, for the last 20 years, the most popular figure in Republika Srpska, often known for being quite willing to work with the Muslim government in Bosnia-Herzegovina, more so than some others that are, I guess, stronger advocates of independence or of their being joined with Serbia, because they're Serbians. Makes kind of sense, right? But deliberately, the Clinton geniuses, the one world geniuses, the Marxist-trained people who have dominated both the United States and certainly much of Western Europe, decided to create trouble. Instead of taking the Serbs and kind of create a country for them, and the Muslims can have a country, they decided to put a bunch of the Serbs under the domination of the Muslims, where it's even questionable whether the Muslims are the majority. The 49% is questioned. 49% of the country is Serbian. And there's a question as to whether or not that's an accurate count. I won't get into that, but I can certainly tell you the thing that's obvious about it is this is yet another one of the abominations in terms of the trashing of the First Amendment and basic human rights. And our State Department not only is on the wrong side of it, one might say the State Department created this Bosnia-Herzegovina that created a haven, because this was created in the early 90s, that later resulted in Muslim extremists coming here and killing Americans. Also, it's been a place where ISIS has trained. It's been a place where Al-Qaeda has trained. It's a place that celebrates anything that goes wrong with us, that despises Israel. And we favor it, as the State Department hasn't figured that out yet, because they haven't figured out who's actually running the State Department. So I don't blame this on the secretary. I just do it to bring up the fact that these deep states are running on their own. And on their own has been the reason why Donald Trump was elected. This illustrates the fact that the State Department is not America first. It's don't offend Muslims first. And if it gets a couple of Americans killed, or a lot of Americans killed, well, that's the price for being an Ivy League graduate. So, we are now going to play for you a very timely interview.
We're live right now.
Well, we are going to play for you at 8 o'clock. Both this introduction, or as much of it as we can, and then we'll play for you the Dodik interview that I did. And there's also available a Dodik interview with Dr. Maria Ryan on, I guess, I don't know about X, but it's available on
or Lindell TV.
On Lindell TV. So you can get a full picture of what this is all about. I was only able to give you a brief one, or I'll miss my plane. So we'll be back tomorrow night, and we'll sum up tomorrow night our fascinating meeting with Giorgia Meloni, the meeting with Matteo Salvini, who also have been accused by the same group of being neo-Nazis, as I have. So I guess I have a certain perspective on this because the first year I was mayor, they would go around with pictures of me looking like Hitler. And then, of course, because I'm Italian-American, pictures of me looking like Mussolini. Of course, it never bothered me because they were the Hitlers, they were the Mussolinis, and I was doing the right thing. Witness the fact that I saved more lives in the history of the city of New York, reduced welfare by more than anyone ever did, and got jobs for people on welfare that nobody ever seemed to be able to do, and they can't do it now. So I kind of know right from wrong. And this one is just another example of why Vice President Vance was in Munich to try to warn Western Europe to wake up and stop serving the interests of Marxism and your own one world idiotic ideology that's destroying countries in Western Europe. Not Italy, not Hungary, and not a lot of Eastern Europe, but Western Europe looks like very much like the 4 dark years that we had under Joseph Biden and company. So please, 8 o'clock X, and then tomorrow night at 7 and 8, we will recap our entire trip, Republika Srpska and Rome. And I will be heading home now. God bless you, and God bless America.
It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate.
Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and welcome to America's Mayor Live from Republika Srpska. That's a little surprising, right? And right next to me, I mean, we go right to the top. Right next to me is the president of Republika Srpska, President Dodik, who, although he's been recently reelected or elected, has been a leading, if not the leading political figure in this country for several decades, and a very, very strong, I have to tell you, after meeting with him, he has a very strong friend of the United States, like so many of his fellow countrymen that are in the United States, particularly in Chicago, but in New York and Los Angeles. There's a very strong Serbian community in the United States, and we appreciate the Serbian community very much. You see in front of me several make great hats. The two in the middle are Trump hats. I think you recognize those. But these two are Make Srpska Great Again, which we really hope happens. And I think with the leadership of this man, that will happen. the day, and we covered this on the earlier show, but I just want this audience to know that the day of President Trump's victory, the building we're in right now, which is the, what do you call this, the presidential?
Yes, Palata predsjednik.
Presidential palace.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the presidential palace. The evening of, I call it the saving of the United States, but the evening of Donald Trump's victory. So you can see their affection for him is not hidden. And then we have a number of photos that we were looking at of, I'll show you one, of the crowd celebrating it the next day. And as we pointed out in the earlier show, this country has been severely subdivided, really with a preference for, for a preference that made Islamic extremist terrorism stronger. It makes no sense. This is a country that shares has many of our values. It's, I'm sure there are some differences. There always are. In the United States, we have differences, but basically shares our values. Bosnia-Herzegovina contains a large number of Islamic extremists, including going back to 2001, with several of them that were trained there. They came and killed my citizens and yours in the World Trade Center. Continue to train terrorists and continue to act as a headquarters, a resting place, with a very, very strong Iranian presence from the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is, of course, our mortal enemy. Yet all of our foreign policy, conducted by Clinton and Biden and Obama, has been to favor Bosnia and Herzegovina and to deliberately hurt Serbia. So, Mr. President, now that I've summed it up, was I accurate?
Da.
And
Da, ispravan način, da.
Yes, you are correct. Bosnia and Herzegovina, if you look at the size of the population, is a Christian country. So Croats who are Catholics and we Serbs who are Orthodox Christian constituted the majority. However, because of interventionism, lots of Croats have left the country. They refuse to live under the dominance of the Muslims. It's impossible to live with them for us. So the Muslims are gradually approaching the size as a population that may constitute the majority of the populace in the country. During the war, the Muslim leader Alija Izetbegović led Bosnia-Herzegovina to the Islamic conference. So Bosnia-Herzegovina became a member, and we, Christians, did not like it. So at the time, we were the only country with a Christian majority that became the part of the Islamic conference. And there was a false stereotype about Christians here, and Muslims were favored at the time. I've already told you that the current solution, I mean the territorial division, is a result of a fake narrative promulgated by the mainstream media at the time, which portrayed us as bad guys. And even President Obama, or Biden, I think, said at a Congress hearing that Serbs were evil, and it turned out that he actually generated lots of problems that we had, and he lied about us a lot, the same way he lied about other things. So we actually welcomed the victory of President Trump as the day of liberation, because if the narrative that was introduced under Biden continued, all Christians would have been expelled and Bosnia would have turned into a Muslim country.
Well, as has happened in other parts of the world, look at Lebanon. Lebanon had a major Christian population until they let the Palestinians in, and Hezbollah developed, and then they've either exiled or murdered a good portion of the Lebanese Christian population. Christians are under great attack in China, in all parts of Africa, by Muslim extremists. I mean, that's you have to identify the group correctly if you're ever going to defeat them. And what has frustrated me is that it's been a policy of the Democrat Party going back to Clinton through Obama, and then very aggressive under Biden, who pretends to be a very devout Catholic, to favor the Islamic side of it, even where there are countries with substantial Islamic extremists within them. For example, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, probably the most prominent was the two people trained there who came and were part of the murderers that attacked us on September 11. But there have been others. When September 11 happened, if you could go back to that, what was was there a reaction in Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Yes, of course. We actually mourned the victims, pointing out that it was Muslim extremists who did that. But the then administration tried to keep the things under the radar. They did not allow the truth to emerge. So actually, those terrorists were trained here to commit that terrorist act. And the US Embassy in Vienna, our embassy in Vienna gave them passports so they could move freely, and obviously they could go to the US and commit the atrocity. So there is a direct link. And also there were terrorist acts later on in London and also Madrid. Those terrorists came from the territory of Bosnia-Herzegovina Muslims. There were no Serbs or Christians among those terrorists who attacked those cities, only Islamists. But at the time, there was an attempt to portray it as something that was not that relevant. But the facts speak that those atrocities were committed by the citizens of Bosnia-Herzegovina Muslims. They actually participated in the acts against the towers and the Pentagon. You were the mayor at the time, and we actually admired your efforts and what you did for your citizens at the time of those atrocities and the great loss of life. You did a lot, and the towers were actually a symbol of the US, and that's why they actually decided to attack the towers at New York.
Well, that's absolutely true.
So they came up with a fake and false narrative that we allegedly committed genocide in Srebrenica, which is not true, because all authorities that study genocide say that it was not genocide. For example, Mr. Zurov, who's the leading Jewish academic, keeps saying that it was not a genocide, but there was an attempt to portray Serbs as bad guys, and then, that's why the narrative, but it's not true. So, not far from here, there was a camp during the Second World War, and the Croat fascists, together with Germans, killed 700,000 Serbs and 30,000 Jews. So they were murdered in that camp. So it's not possible, to say that we committed a genocide.
Where was that camp?
40 kilometers from here. It's called Jasenovac.
Yes.
And now part of it is in Bosnia and part of it is in Croatia. So it crosses the border. But the truth could never be heard. The communist regime under Tito, who was a Croat, did not allow the truth to come out about the suffering of the Serbs. After Russians, Serbs actually lost most of its population in the Second World War. In the First World War, that was actually caused by Austria and Germany, Serbs lost 70% of the male population.
70%?
So it was from 1914 to 1918. and 36% of the total population was lost. And then 20 years later, there came Hitler and then killed over 1 million Serbs in the Second World War. Muslims from here, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, sided with Hitler, and they were a puppet state. And then Clinton administration came into power and gave them the right to design a state. So that's not fair in historical terms. Serbs wanted to be separated from Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that's what we seek today. Bosnia and Herzegovina is an impossible country, an impossible state, for many reasons. Very difficult history, full of suffering. And Serbs are those that mark the difficult days from the history, but Muslims actually celebrate those days. For example, Srebrenica. Clinton visited Srebrenica, I think, twice to support the stereotype. Once I was told, a friend from the US told me that I was battling windmills because 450 Clinton's people built their careers spreading lies about Serbs. And then they asked me, okay, do you think you can change anything about that? So that's why I'm really glad to be given this opportunity to speak. And I'll be really happy if anyone to have this, what I've just described, checked by anyone. So if you want to study the suffering of Serbs throughout history, we can give you the material. And also in Srebrenica, about the genocide. There was a verdict, a decision by the Hague Tribunal saying it was a genocide, but 3,500 of those killed were soldiers. All women and children were safely transported to other territories. Obviously, there were civilian casualties, but Serbs were killed as well. In the vicinity of Srebrenica, there is a village called Kravice.
What's the name?
Kravice. It was populated by the Serbs at the time. Muslims attacked on Christmas Eve. It was Orthodox Christmas, and on Christmas Eve,
January 7th.
Yes.
so the Muslims came from Srebrenica, entered the village, and killed 76 people that very night. And the Hague Tribunal never condemned it as a crime. It was never prosecuted because that was the time, the era of the Democrats. I find it really difficult to use the word Democrats. No one has ever been held accountable or prosecuted for that atrocity.
This is the same tribunal that has indicted Benjamin Netanyahu now? Is it the same tribunal? Yeah. And ignored
that's
Hamas.
The same.
And
that's
ignored
the same
Hamas.
story.
And ignores Hamas.
No, they think that Hamas is a charity organization.
Yeah. Well,
that's nonsense that can be digested and devoured only by those who are passionate. Netanyahu actually defends his people. And what would other people actually, other prime ministers do if 400 people burst into their countries, killing 1,000 of civilians? Hamas was in power in Gaza. Actually, they decided to commit terrorism, so they had actually to count on the consequences. So what? Netanyahu should not have or could not have defended his people. So it seems that some see it as a crime if you defend your country, your people. The same story we've had here, every single president of the Republika Srpska has been treated the same way. Now I'm awaiting a verdict from the Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Everyone on the bench is a Muslim. The prosecutor is a Muslim. And here, there is this individual who was sent here under Biden's administration, saying that he's the authority. So he issued a decree stating that whoever fails to comply with his decision will be punished by imprisonment ranging from 6 months to 5 years. So I lead Serbs who had voted for me for 20 years. So all elections, mind you, were controlled by Americans, by the USAID, and we see what the USAID has done in the US, and you can only imagine what they did here. I mean, if they could do what they did in the US, I mean, the nonsensical things, or, well, that's the nice word. Just imagine what they did here. So I'm being tried because I failed to comply with the decrees of a foreigner who has no authority whatsoever.
What kind of decrees would the Biden appointee, what kind of decrees would he make? Like, what would he say? What would he order you to do? Just so we get a sense. Well, I mean, it's very, very much typical of the Biden administration to completely trash free speech and to act like they're dictators. So, what was he?
Well, one day he got here and said that I had to obey whatever he said. And I told him, well, I had been elected by my people and I had to adhere to the Constitution. And then he invited Mr. Escobar, one of the chaps, and he phoned me saying that I had to obey the rules. They called them the rules, although they change them every day. And then he threatened me, saying that if I failed to obey, they would designate me and my family, and that I would feel the power of the United States. And I said, well, screw off, you and your sanctions. I mean, you cannot threaten me. If you want to talk to me, you need to treat me as an equal. You cannot threaten me. So that was the background, you see. That was the environment. And then they started designated left and right to me, my associates, my son, my daughter. My daughter has 4 kids, and she used to own a restaurant here, and she rented a restaurant. Actually, it was not in her ownership. And the US designated the restaurant ruthlessly. So over 50 employees lost their jobs. And also Murphy is an evilmonger, so he actually was quite arrogant. He thought that he could do anything because he represented the US. He enjoyed full support from Biden, and Biden actually treated Serbs badly. And we were to expect everything. And also, there was another way. They fought us because they knew that we supported Trump, President Trump. Actually, they were quite cynical. They laughed at us. They thought that we were losers, that President Trump stood no chance, that he would be a bad solution for America. Just let me illustrate this. Thanks, Mr. Musk, we heard that the USAID here in Bosnia and Herzegovina spent $402 million over a period of 4 years for different operations. And then we started actually investigating to understand. Well, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosnia and Herzegovina received officially 150 million. The rest vanished, and they used all the money for political interventions. And we know the media they supported. There is a BN television. Allegedly, they are an opposition television. Every 3 months, they would bring cash and pay them from the U.S. Embassy. And I'm ready I'm saying this responsibly.
This is a network that's, when you say opposition to your government, is that what you mean? They were funding a network They were funding a network that opposed your government.
Yeah,
Like,
actually, they bankrolled that television, and a neutral TV station, it's called alternative television, was designated. Imagine that that administration designated a media outlet, and that television employed 150 people simply because this Murphy character did not like them. I mean, he just behaved recklessly.
well, he behaved.
He actually harmed the U.S., but he did not. That did not affect our love for America. We respect America. We love President Trump, and we respect what America is, and we want to cooperate with others. During this entire time, we also cooperated with Russia and Russians because of our historical and other ties. We thought that we should not impose sanctions onto Russia. And I'm really glad to see that President Trump and President Putin are seeking to establish peace and a balance that would ensure long-lasting peace in this area. Without President Trump, Biden would have definitely led all of us into the Third World War. And I'm saying this because I still have some sort of psychosis caused by Biden rule. I really cannot comprehend that a great American nation made it possible for such a scoundrel to come into power.
I couldn't either.
Because America, does not suffer improvisation of any sort.
Probably there's no one on earth that would agree with you more, since I spent a great deal of my time investigating Biden. I'm pretty much the sole reason that his criminality was revealed. And I'm the person who found and got and publicized his son's computer hard drive, for which I was accused of being a Russian agent for 17 months by Biden personally. In fact, I'm suing. So I'm suing Biden for defamation.
Ja sam još jedan agent.
And even when it was proved 100% false, no one bothered to correct it. So the New York Times, for example, has won Pulitzer Prizes for the Russian collusion story, which has been proven to be completely untrue. Actually, the reason I've been pursued so much is there was Ukrainian collusion. The Ukrainian ambassador endorsed Hillary Clinton for president, and a great deal of the false information that was acquired, and Hillary Clinton paid for it, was with the help of Ukrainians. So there was no Russian collusion; there was Ukrainian collusion, and we seem to forget that. But in any event, the reality is when throughout these Democrat administrations, there's this preference for the people who have attacked us and the people who are organized attacking us, and then there's this very, very serious prejudice against you. Now, tell me your position on, contrast for me the position of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We talked about 9/11. What about on October 7th, when Israel was attacked by Hamas? Not even an attack, a terrorist attack to go after women and children. What was your position on that, and what was Bosnia and Herzegovina's?
That is the same ideology behind those two attacks, the same approach. Do we need another such event before the people in America understand that the same narrative, Islamic terrorism, not all Muslims are terrorists, but it happens in this day that all terrorists are Muslims. And we can prove that in Bosnia and Herzegovina there are good people, Muslims, whom I respect, whom I know. But it is definitely clear that in these terrorist groups that harass the world, there are no Serbs, no Russians, but there are Mujahedins and members of Islamic State. So, in that respect, that is Islamic ideology, the same one that attacked on 9/11 and the event in Gaza. Those are terrible images which ought to be shown, and trust me, not a single day goes by before this image comes to my mind, and that is how Hamas terrorists surprised a sleeping family, and they killed the father before two sons by cutting off his head with an object that is similar to an agricultural tool, and then they focused on the boys, and then they say is that Netanyahu's fault? Does anyone in the United States really believe that they would not do that if they were given an opportunity again? Also here, maybe for some political Islamic reasons, the story here can repeat. But in the American media, you could not hear stories about this, or you should not compare these events, because it was looked at as if you were spreading racial or some other hatred. I'm not spreading such a narrative. I have Muslim friends, but in these days here and Middle East, and what happened in the United States, what happened in Madrid and London, all the terrorists were Muslims motivated by Islamic fundamentalism and Islamic State. Should I deal with exact evidence? I mean, you can have a look at it.
Well, I find it very difficult when I saw that in some places, some of the Western media, they'll say that your party has neo-Nazi connections. Now, didn't you receive a letter or a recognition of your support for Israel from Benjamin Netanyahu? I seem to recall that Netanyahu mentioned the fact that you supported them. It would be very strange that a neo-Nazi would support the Jewish people. And of course, during the Second World War, you were slaughtered along with the Jewish people by the Nazis. So I'm not even going to ask you to answer that, but I am going to ask you a more general question. It seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that neo-Nazi charge is used by the left wing very often, maybe not all the time, maybe sometimes it's correct, but it's overused, and it's used for any right-wing group of people that they want to destroy. The way they charge us in America, Republicans, with being racist. And of course, personally, I've been compared by the Democrats to Hitler when I was mayor, and also, because I'm Italian-American, to Mussolini. Now, my uncles fought against Italy, and my grandfather fought against his home country. Well, he stood against it. His children fought against it. And one of my cousins lost his leg in Italy, fighting against Italy and Germany. But I was compared to Mussolini and to Hitler. So I'm very aware of this. But I look at what's going on in Germany, and election just took place a couple of days ago. 49% of the people voted for what you'd have to regard as a conservative platform, cut out the illegal immigration, reduce spending, get control over the government and make it much, much smaller. But the establishment right-wing party is accusing the new conservative party, and they're using this neo-Nazi thing again, and they're going to ally, they're trying to ally with the socialists who are pretty close to communists, completely frustrating the will of the people. So in America, we just hear this. You know, all of a sudden they'll say, there's a new right-wing party in, pick a country, Italy. Well, they did it in Italy until Giorgia Meloni came along. All the right-wing parties in Italy were neo-Nazi. Now she's dispelled that by the way she governs. But it seems to be the charge, and unfortunately, this is why we're covering it in America, not enough people dig into it and find out that this is a tactic. I mean, this country is the furthest thing from a Nazi country. Right?
Ne, to je ozbiljan. To je ozbiljan proces revizije istorije.
Yes, that is a serious process, revision of history, and one should not be naive. One should just look at the facts.
Djed, znači neposredni predak
Grandfather
Scholza, koji je bio kancelar Njemačke, je
of
bio
Scholz, who
oficir
was
Gestapo,
chancellor in Germany, was
koji
Gestapo
je
officer.
za vrijeme Drugog svjetskog rata
In World
čak
War
upravljao
II,
Kijevom. Od
Ruled, managed
koja je
Kiev.
sada predsjednica Europske komisije,
Ms. von der Leyen, who is currently president of European Commission, her ancestors were close associates to Hitler's movement with high positions. They even supported, and there is evidence of financial support to the project, and now they would like to whitewash it from the German nation. That is why Netanyahu said, man who belongs to a people that suffered, now they say he should be designated as a fascist, he should be designated as a bad guy rather than the bad history of Germany, or myself, or you, like you described. I was born in an area, and I described a big concentration camp where 700,000 Serbs were killed over the period of 4 years. So they were killed on daily basis. In my family, the extended family, they killed almost all that they could kill, and very few people survived. That is why my family is not so numerous, and my surname is rare, because many were killed. So it is very humiliating to hear it nowadays. And you have this instinct to fight, and you feel like you should say, hold on, how can you lie so much? But they keep on lying. So it is true, when they dislike a person, they would link it to neo-Nazis, this or that. But listen, AfD in Germany is supported by the Serbs living there. So, can it be that the current American policy and politics is so absent-minded that one of the close associates of Mr. Trump says AfD should be supported?
And actually, the AfD wishes to cooperate with everyone, with the US, with Russia. So they are being labeled as neo-Nazis. Actually, those other people are their offspring, and they keep provoking wars. They want to use the current images to replace the images from the Second World War. Yeah. What about Israel? If they were not Hamas, if it were not for Hamas, there would be no suffering. I mean, it's quite logical that some countries insist on ending Hamas. I myself would fight against such an ideology, but Europe has failed, and Europe has no leader. Tell me, who of them is the leader of Europe today? What about raw materials? No, none. Is it independent? No. Without the huge amounts of money the US has been giving Europe, the EU would have dissolved a long time ago. What about the values? Yeah, they have actually undermined those values with the Ukrainian narrative. Actually, Europe followed Biden, and we know that Biden ran some serious business there, and we know that his son sat on management boards or boards of directors of major companies with major profits. And actually, to prevent, his meddling, they actually started the war in Ukraine. And historically, we know what Ukraine is. It turns out that Americans who in history fought against communism, and we suffered greatly under communism. So Americans of that time were right fighting communism. And now it turns out that Biden's Americans actually are fighting to preserve the communist borders, because Ukraine got into existence within the boundaries as they are now by communists, because communists said, okay, this is Ukraine, these are the new borders. Khrushchev was a Ukrainian, and he also granted and gave as a present certain territories to this Ukraine.
Well,
and now
it's
America seems to be requested to defend the communist legacy.
Well, you know, it's very frustrating to watch the tremendous Marxist influence that has taken place in my government. That goes back really probably to Woodrow Wilson within the Democratic Party. And it becomes very, very difficult because there's so much propaganda, so much brainwashing. It's very difficult to unravel all of this. And it's been very, very helpful that you've given us this perspective, because I think, you know, some Americans were very surprised when Vice President Vance spoke in Munich, which was the city of appeasement, the city where Chamberlain gave away Europe out of fear rather than strength. So it's good to get a different perspective on this. And this is what we try to do. We try to give our people a different perspective. But I want to close on a lighter note. So I was very surprised by one thing so far. None of the politics surprises me. I mean, I've followed it, I know it, and I know the propaganda they engage in. So that is not so much of a surprise, although your knowledge of it and your eloquence on the subject is a surprise. This country has a basketball league, and you were a basketball player, and your son was a basketball player, and he's involved in the league now. And we met some American basketball players here, and they're very enthusiastic. How did basketball get so popular here?
It's always a matter of love. You see, when I was young, actually, I played basketball, and I really loved basketball. There was a club that we developed, and now it plays in the regional league, which encompasses the former Yugoslavia. And there is a club from Dubai, actually, so they are here as well, a member of the league. And that's a positive thing. So we have Zvezda and Partizan from Belgrade, so they are in the championship league, and Dubai and us. So we are the 4th or 5th in the league, I think. So we'll be playing in a playoff. And in order to make our club successful, we invited some Americans, and they are our key players. So they're here playing with our people, and they are the best.
Are they good? Are they good players, the Americans?
They are the lead players, actually. Everything depends on their mood, actually, whether they're in a good mood. If they're in a good mood, then we'll definitely win the game.
Could it be the following that I also found out? Bosnian men are, on average, the tallest men in the world. So now I look around and I see a lot of power forwards and centers here that are Bosnian. But you're a tall group. Did you know that? Did you know that when they evaluate all different races, and they say Serbian men are among the tallest in the world. Your average height is 6 feet. Whereas the average height generally is about 5'9", 9.5. And then, of course, you have a lot of 6'3" and above.
Once I went to meet Ms. Merkel when she was the Chancellor. And when
that
I
must have been
entered her
pleasant.
office...
That must have been pleasant. Did you get along well with her?
No,
But
not
President
really.
Ali uglavnom kad sam
But
ušao,
when I entered her office,
uvijek su me ovako raspoložile razne priče koje je Berlusconi tada pričao.
actually, at the time, Berlusconi, had all sorts of stories, about Ms. Merkel. But actually, I got to meet her. So once I entered her office, and she said, "Oh, well, how tall are you? Is everyone from Bosnia so tall?" And I said, "No, only Serbs in Bosnia are tall." So our key players come from the NBA, and we are very proud. And we have one player who plays in the NBA, whose ancestors come from here, actually. And then at one point of time, they moved to Vojvodina in Serbia.
He comes from Srpska.
Yes, they are from here. So at one point of time, they moved to Vojvodina, and now he's the key player in the NBA, Nikola Jokic. And even Doncic, his father is from Serbia, and his mother is Slovenian, and he was born in Slovenia, and he played in Slovenia, but he also has some Serbian background. Also Bogdanovic and many other players, Divac, Stojakovic. All of them are Serbs who contributed to the popularity of basketball here and played for the strongest league. I actually would go to the games in the US before Biden designated me and my family. For example, when I visited Washington, I would always go to watch an NBA game. Johnson was the key player there, and many others at Madison Square Garden. Actually, I watched a number of games, so I've never given up on following what's happening with the NBA League or Los Angeles West.
Yes.
Yes. Of course, you know that right near the end of the campaign, we had a gigantic rally for President Trump in Madison Square Garden.
Da, pratio sam, da.
Yeah, and he got a
Yes,
tremendous
I
reception
know.
in a Democrat stronghold. Well,
Vidjelo se i na glasanju.
Mr. President, it's been a great pleasure.
I mean, the vote showed how strong it was.
It's been a great pleasure. I really have learned a great deal. But most importantly, I'm able to convey to my people the other side of the story, which they never get. And that's the purpose of what we do. We try to bring you the news that is censored. And I can't think of a situation much worse than this. Maybe there are some, but very, very few. This is the kind of censorship that was, unfortunately, became the norm in the Biden administration, although it goes way, way back. The seeds of it go way back to Clinton and Obama. So thank you, President Dodik. It was a great pleasure, and I think this will be something, real food for thought for many, many Americans, because I'll speak for myself.
Yeah.
To me, the future for America largely has a lot to do with Eastern Europe. I'm hoping that Vice President Vance's speech is a wake-up call to Western Europe. But Eastern Europe doesn't have to be awakened. You already are. And I think a lot of our future is going to be tied with you as allies. So thank you very much for having us
Mi
here.
podržavamo Vansa i aplaudirali smo njegovom
Yeah, so we actually applauded Vice President Vance's speech, and we actually hope that Europeans will understand his speech as a wake-up call. He can only help them. We actually subscribe to President Trump's view, who said that Biden's administration was the worst administration in the American history, and his administration actually made quite a mess here. And let not people forget that. Thank you very much.
The only solace I can give you is this is not the only place where they left a terrible mess. But right now, in my country, we are very, very excited because we're reforming that, we're changing it, and we're moving on to making America greater than it's ever been, like you're going to do with Srpska. Thank you. Well, we'll be back shortly.